Folks, a lot of people are talking past 2 weeks now. Actually, it's past 2 Saturdays because these past 2 Saturdays, especially these past 2 Saturday mornings, have been. Sorry about that. Have been kind of historic, if you will. See, a week ago yesterday was the last time that any network of any kind broadcast Saturday morning cartoons. I had to get some coffee there. But yeah, it was the last time any network had broadcast any kind of Saturday morning cartoons, and that was the CW. CW's Vortex block came to an end yesterday. I mean, not yesterday, but a week ago yesterday. And thus, at the end of the Vortex block on the very last Saturday in September of 2014 for the CW, also came to an end, also meant that Saturday morning cartoons as a whole came to an end. That's right. The over 50-year run Saturday morning cartoons came to an end on the last Saturday last month. And when one thinks about it, it's kind of sad. And now you have a lot of people, as of this weekend, talking about how historic this weekend is because yesterday was the first Saturday morning ever without Saturday morning cartoons. And it was just, I guess you could say, very bittersweet, very heartbreaking in a sense, because it was like, why would this all suddenly come to an end? Why couldn't it go for another year or two? Well, a lot of things have been pointed out as to why Saturday morning cartoons started to decline and eventually end up where it is now, where Saturday mornings are now known as Saturday morning education. Yeah, that's basically it. Every network that used to do Saturday morning cartoons is either dedicating their programs to doing sports or news, which isn't a problem, but also mainly dedicating a lot of it to educational children's programming. And one has to say to themselves, well, don't kids get a little sick and tired of educational stuff all the time? Don't they get kind of sick and tired of that? It's like they deal with that 5 days a week for 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours. Don't they get sick and tired of that? And of course they get sick and tired of it, but this is the FCC for you. This is the FCC. This is a lot of the parental groups out there that are saying, look, kids still need to learn. You see, the real reason behind that is because they feel, and this is my opinion, they feel that the more educational programming kids watch, the more kids will stay out of trouble, stay out of gangs, and be more responsible, be more matured, be more ready for the real world. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I can understand where they're coming from there, but they also have to understand that kids need a break too. See, I can tell you this from experience. As a kid, Saturday morning cartoons were always looked at to me as being my day off from school. Everybody pretty much knew that. It was my day off from school. It was my sister's day off from school. It's basically like school is essentially like our work week. We want to have it. We want to have a day off. We want to have a day off, and Saturday mornings were looked at as our day off from work. That was it. It wasn't looked at, as, oh, it's just, your days. It's like, oh, it's just. You're not really having a day off. You're just getting like 4 hours of fun or 4 hours of just animation that you usually get after school. Here's the thing, that you usually get before or after school. Here's the thing though. We get about an average together, I will admit, about 5 to 6 hours between before and after school. Actually, it's less than that. It's actually more like 4 hours. Majority of the day is dominated. A majority of the day, like I say, is dominated even to this day, by adult programming. And I'm not talking mature adult programming, no. I'm talking more of the talk shows, news shows, soap operas, you name it. That kind of programming. And just to, know that, hey, we have 6 hours, a majority, because when one thinks about it, a majority of all that programming is dedicated to adults during the weekdays. And 4 of it was only dedicated to kids before and after school. So to know that kids like me at the time in the 80s and even growing up in the 90s had at least 6-7 hours of school, I mean not school, but 6 or 7 hours of animated programming that we could wake up and watch was saying something. It really was. I mean, to wake up at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. and to go to 12 o'clock, mostly at most times, was unbelievable. It was a great time as a kid. And even as I grew up and became a teenager, it was still a great time. It still was. The only exceptions to Saturday mornings sometimes are like what's going on right now, and that was college football. Sometimes, depending on where you lived, a game came on at 9 o'clock. If a game came on at 9 o'clock, a lot of your shows got pushed up earlier or were preempted for that week. They were preempted for that week. And as a kid growing up, you didn't like that. You didn't like the fact that, hey, what happened to my you didn't like the, hey, what happened to my Bugs Bunny and Tweety? Or, hey, what happened to my Wild West Cowboys of Moo Mesa? Or, hey, what happened to this? What happened to that? Excuse me. It's more like, hey, what happened to this? It's like all these shows that came on. It's like, like Beetlejuice. You would wonder, what happened to Beetlejuice? Or, whatever. It's like, whatever was on the networks at that time, Smurfs, Beetlejuice, Bugs Bunny and Tweety, Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner, Flintstone Kids, Flintstone Funnies, Ninja Turtles, which became part of CBS in the 90s, Raw Tunage, what else was it? Garfield, you name it, all these cartoons that came around. Rock and Wrestling, Muppet Babies. I mean, the list goes on. And anytime they got preempted as a kid, you were not happy. You were not happy because suddenly it was being preempted either for a presidential swear-in or for a college football game, and you didn't like it. Or even an NFL wildcard game, and you didn't like it because your time was being taken away from you. Your time that you had been waiting a whole week for was being taken away. Now, some might say that was kind of... Now, some might say, well, that kind of helped out the other networks that weren't in that position. And, I admit that it did kind of help out the other networks that were not in that position. It did. I mean, when one thinks about it, let's say you're ABC and you're preempting some shows to air college football, then that's going to help out CBS and that's going to help out NBC, who are not showing it at that time, or are not showing college football at that time. But if it's NBC and ABC that did it simultaneously, then that's going to help out CBS. And then, surprisingly, when Fox came around, if all 3 of the founding networks of Saturday mornings, which was NBC, CBS, and ABC, if they will all do college football, broadcast, because of course NBC has Notre Dame, CBS has the SEC, and ABC, has whatever. Sometimes, that benefited Fox, especially when it started its Saturday morning run. In Kids WB, it helped benefit them because everybody would have to go watch their programming. And that was later on, like in the 90s and all that, when Saturday mornings was still relevant and was still popular. Yes, again, I admit that everything, that people have said in these a lot of these reports, a lot of these articles. Yes, I admit, maybe not again, but still I admit that the increase of things like Netflix, the increase of things like Hulu, cable, mostly caused the downside. But here's the thing though, cable really didn't start causing a downside in Saturday mornings until really a lot of things about cable changed. You see, even to this day, you still have to, if you want certain things, you still have to have certain packages. I'm not denying that. But back then, 80s and even somewhat the 90s, cable didn't really have that much of an effect. It really didn't. The only time it really started having an effect is when Cartoon Network was around, and when Boomerang was launched, and then Disney went Toon Disney. That's when it started to slowly have an effect, as well as with Nicktoons. All these cartoon-related channels started to have an effect on the Saturday morning block. But still, even with all these animated networks, 24-hour networks, Saturday mornings was still there. They were still all right, and it's all because all because of one thing. One thing when it came to cable, there was no on-demand just yet. But as soon as on-demand did show up, that's when it started hurting the Saturday morning genre. And the same with Netflix and Hulu. When they started becoming prominent, that started hurting as well. And then of course you have the advent of YouTube, Dailymotion, Blimp. All this just started to really add up, and yeah, that caused Saturday mornings to downside a little bit. But there were networks like the CW that kept fighting and saying, look, there's still room. But yes, eventually the CW did finally give in and say, okay, fine. People can find these mostly anywhere now. What's the point? And that's what's disappointing, because there's still, to me, a market out there for Saturday morning cartoons on broadcast television. There is. There is still a market out there. And some people may not think that's true, but you know what? It is true. It is true. There is a market out there. I mean, why do you think a lot of companies are selling DVDs of Saturday morning cartoons at times? Because they know there's still a market out there. They know it's still a market. But the thing is, right now, everything's condensed into a bubble where we don't know how long this bubble is going to last. We don't know how strong this bubble is and what it's going to take to break through it. Strange comparisons, you use the WWE. A lot of people complain about it's just the same old stuff over and over again. They're not what they used to be. They're stuck in a bubble. They need to get out of that bubble. And that's true. But the thing is, the bubble is very similar to what's going on with, the whole situation right now as far as Saturday morning cartoons are concerned. It's the fact that they can't get out of the bubble just yet because, one, they don't know what's strong enough to break it. They don't know yet. I mean, it's like no matter how edgy they try to be, kayfabe or not, WWE sometimes, despite what they might do, has to apologize. Like, they had a whole, incident with a flag and the Russian flag in Big Show. They had to apologize for that, kayfabe or not. And why? And why, if you will? Because they're stuck in that bubble. And, some people just don't see that. And I do. I and a lot of other people see that right now, Saturday morning cartoons, I look at it as the fact that they're only shelved indefinitely. And what I mean by indefinitely, when you take a look at it from a sports term, is for the time being, until they're needed again. And you know what? They will be needed. They will be needed. Trust me on that. They will be needed. Because you can't do Saturday mornings. Hold on for a sec. I'll be back with part 2.